Okay, let's get this over with. Warning, this video contains excessive swearing due to the horrendous nature of the film being analyzed and the need for comedic relief for the sake of the creator and viewer. This video is not made for kids. Viewer discretion is advised. Have fun! Hi all, Moonlight Rider 24 here, and welcome back to How It Could Have Been a Masterpiece, the series where I review and dissect each and every Thomas movie in special and order in depth, and all the while discuss how it could have been improved, and at the end, if I think it warrants one, pitch my own rewrite. Now, we've covered both model series specials and the first CGI special, all of which had something interesting to offer and much to discuss, and now we've reached everyone's favorite special, and the one I've been dreading the most, Misty Island Rescue. Alright, let's just get this out of the way. Misty Island Rescue is just a master. Ha! Those words don't even belong in the same sentence, let alone the same thought. Misty Island Rescue is just awful. And although I'm sure everyone who's seen this movie knows why, I've decided I'm still going to go over both the most common criticisms of the film and then express my personal opinions on why this movie just doesn't work for the most part, and how it could have been an at least somewhat tolerable experience. Now, because of this hick bomb's going to be a little bit different. Like the last ones, I'm still going to go through the film and my thoughts on most scenes, but unlike them, I'm not going to waste time going into depth with all of them, and I'm instead going to try to skim through all the dirt and unnecessary fluff this movie has and focus on its core problems and worst, most unforgivable mistakes and qualities. Plus, it's safe to say, as I've already started the script, that this hick bomb is not going to be as long as the rest. Both the ones I've done and all to come, because I do not want to waste my time, let alone a whole hour discussing this piece of shit, no good, garbage ass damn it! This movie, and because it's mostly going to be negative, I don't want to ramble on and just continuously repeat myself and make a video that isn't enjoyable for any of y'all, because that isn't what I want. I want to at least make all these hick bombs and analyses fun and enjoyable, but I gotta say, this is definitely going to be the hardest one to get through because of how bad this movie is. So bear with me, folks. I'm going to try to make this as painless, impossible, and short and enjoyable as possible. Also, yes, by the time this video gets out, Unlucky Tug will publish his Thomas retrospective of Season 14 in Misty Island Rescue, where he discusses his thoughts on the film and pitches how he'd improve and fix it, which I have no doubt will be great and probably better than what I've come up with. So just know, I started the script and gathered my ideas months in advance, and came up with my own ideas and some inspiration from all of you before he made his video. So please know, if there's any major similarities, I'm not simply trying to copy off of his ideas. These are my own ideas, plus some suggestions from all of you and other users in the fandom, which I will give credit for. But if you think his video is much better and don't like my rewrite as much, that's completely fine. But please, all I ask is you respect both of our videos and don't compare them to each other. That just isn't fair, as he's been doing this much longer than I have. But I do like to think I'm a decent writer and still have plenty to offer in this fandom myself. So I hope you enjoy both of our videos and remain courteous in the comments below. So with all that out of the way, let's do this. Plot summary and background. A new search and rescue center is being built on the island of Sodor, made specifically by jobi wood, a rare but strong type of wood that comes from trees only found in a few corners of the world. However, when devious Diesel attempts to show off and take the jobi logs to the center himself, he causes an accident and the jobi logs go falling into the sea. But Thomas manages to save him before he falls and is deemed a hero. As a reward, he is promised a trip to the mainland to visit their search and rescue center. Unfortunately, when there is no room on a ship to the mainland, he takes a risk and decides to ride a raft behind it, but gets lost at sea. Thomas somehow ends up lost on a mysterious island that he's only heard to be myth and legend, and meets three strange engines. Can Thomas work with his new friends and find a way home to help finish the center? You find out in this movie. So, we already went through why the Miller era mostly sucks in the last movie, specifically the majority of the episodes and two of the movies, so I'm not going to repeat myself and we'll just sum it up in three things. Bad dialogue, repetitive and poor story writing, and character flanderization. The dialogue talks down to kids, the stories use the same three-track formula and are boring, and the characters are all reduced to single defining traits, and as a result, the show became generic hogwash for toddlers. In stark contrast to the once wonderful, well-written, and charming show we all know and love that appealed to all ages, which will return to a fair degree in the next era of the show, but we'll talk about that later when we get to it down the line. So yeah, the Miller era sucks and its problems are present here in this movie, and we'll get into them as the review goes on. But before we get into the actual film, I'd like to address the most common criticisms of it so we can keep them in mind as we watch and review, and then discuss them at the end to see how true or accurate they are, and then I'll go over my own points. Number 1. the rhyming and dialogue. One of the biggest and most annoying things about this movie is the constant damn rhyming in the dialogue. I mean, seriously, every other line in this film past the 10-minute mark is a rhyme. At first, it's not really noticeable, and it's like, oh yeah, sure, whatever. But then when Thomas starts constantly repeating himself with rhymes and his stupid mantras, it becomes just unbearable. I mean, wow, seriously? It just makes Thomas so much more annoying as it's primarily him. Plus, on top of that, the dialogue is just so basic and weak, just like most of the Miller era. It's not the worst dialogue I've ever heard, but it's still bad. Almost every character talks like an idiot with only basic human knowledge, and it's so irritating. Sure, there's a few good, decent lines throughout, but I mean, for every good line, there's at least 3, "That's right," or "I make good decisions," sigh. Number 2, Thomas's character. Thomas is just so unlikable in this film and is such a jerk. He's a bigot to Diesel, rude to the logging locos, who are admittedly strange, but they were the only other engines he saw on the island, so they were the only ones that could help him, so he should have been nicer, and just a cocky asshole in general. I know Thomas can be a serious asshole, but come on, I think we all agree this was too far. He gets a big head after rescuing Diesel and being congratulated for it, and thinks he's a genius or something and makes perfect decisions every time, and it gets so annoying, and he's just so unbearable. The character arc isn't really enjoyable or nice and has hardly any payoff or sweet moments besides when Topham jumps with joy after finding Thomas. So yeah, I agree, it just doesn't work at all. Number 3, the lack of logic. So the biggest problem with the movie is, in both my and almost everyone else's opinions, the illogical nature of its core concepts, ideas, and overarching plot. The idea that there's some mysterious island off the coast of England and close to the Isle of Man that we've never heard of or seen exists is only now just emerging as fact rather than fiction? Really? I know we're talking about a world where talking trains and vehicles is logical, but I mean, come on. Thomas and Friends has always attempted to be set in the world of realism, or at least a good chunk of it used to, and even when it wasn't that realistic, like in some episodes of Season 5, one of the best seasons of the whole show, it made up for it with phenomenal stories, action, character work, and writing in general that made Sodor still feel like a real place where all sorts of escapades, tales, and adventures have occurred, and is full of lore and history to learn about. But here it goes just too far in my opinion. In concept for a fan film, for example like The Secret Island by Thomas Van Eight, a fun little film about another mysterious island that you should totally check out, it could be fun. But in the real series, just no. It doesn't work. Misty Island shouldn't exist, and therefore neither should this movie. Also, the logging locos are annoying as shit, and it makes no sense why they're here, as they're American designs that are old as shit, and the island is desolate and devoid of almost any human life. So how does it function? Why are they running? And why are they still making logs? There's so many unanswered questions that I'll try to answer and resolve in the improvements, changes, and rewrite section of the video. So yeah, those are the most common criticisms of this film, and honestly, they're all valid and I agree with them. But like I said, I'll try to make my own points and express my own opinions about the film as much as possible without consistently reiterating these. With those points in mind, let's watch this, quote-unquote, movie. The movie begins with, like the other Miller era specials, a little animated intro sequence, and honestly, this one's alright. As we'll come to see, in my opinion, the soundtrack of this film slaps, and is by far the best part about it, and I never tire of hearing the main theme of it. As long as I don't think about the trauma and terror that follows it. So yeah, the intro is well animated and cool, and almost makes this movie seem like it's going to be epic and fun. Liars! Time to get into the actual movie. Of course, it starts with a generic Miller-era opening with boring exposition and standard shots of the engines. Great, now I know we're in for a real good time. But then we're actually treated to this nice air shot of Harold as we're introduced to the rescue center, one of the main new locations of the film, which I'm sure will have payoff later and totally be used to its full potential. They try to hype it up and I respect it though. We meet Thomas, who's helping out at the center. Topham shows the rescue team where all the buildings will be, and we're introduced to our first new character and one of the most underused and bland ones in the series, Captain. Now Captain is fine, it's nice we have a boat designated for rescues on the island, but he's hardly ever used in the series and never gets his own episode, so he's kinda just there. Totally not just for merch or anything, nope! Topham then tells everyone that the main building will be built by none other than Joby Wood. Yay I guess? He claims it's the strongest wood of all, and the characters act like, and the narrator even says, they've all heard of it, so cool I guess? Gonna be plot device soon, so guess it's important enough. We then join Thomas and Percy at the docks where the Joby Wood has arrived. And lots of it. Gee whiz, guys, I hope nothing bad is gonna happen to the Joby Wood or that it all suddenly disappear and get magically reduced to only a few logs. Nah,
No, sorry, Bob.
Don't be silly. That's never gonna happen. But it did happen, didn't it? Where the fuck did it all go? But hey, oh my god, it's our Lord and Savior hero, the only good character in this movie. Yay, oh my god, I hope he plays a role in this movie. He's only there to say 2 lines and delivers a piece of setup. Great. Not that I expected him to play a major role or anything, but it'd be better than what we got. Anywho, the setup of Hero mentioning there are only a few islands where the jobi trees grow is actually and probably one of the very few decent writing choices in the movie. A piece of setup. Wow, great job, Miller. You're doing great, sweetie. Topham says whoever is the most useful engine at the end of the day will pull the logs, causing the engines to become excited and competitive. Of course, Thomas wants to pull it because, it's Thomas. Then good old Diesel strolls or oils in. Thomas blabs about how he wants to pull it, and Diesel's like, but I'm useful too. I want to pull it. And Thomas is like, as Tug said in his ranking video, ha, no fuck you, lol. Thomas is a racist bigot in this film with prejudice against diesels we thought he overcame in calling all engines, but no. Can't have characters actually change and grow, now can we? Yeah, Thomas is an asshole. Way too much of an asshole in this film. Like, out of character asshole. Don't get me wrong, I much prefer a kinder, more mature Thomas over the jerky, immature one, but I at least know being a jerk sometimes is part of his character, but come on, this is just too far. Diesel can be a dick sometimes, but this just isn't fair. Thomas says that because he's a diesel, he'll never be as useful as a steamy. What the fuck? You know what, I'm not gonna even talk about this anymore. It sends a bad message to kids because although Thomas has a quote-unquote character arc in this film, the film nor any of the characters hardly ever detest, discourage, or acknowledge how wrong Thomas and his mindset and actions are until the end of the film. So it's like, how are the kids supposed to know he's in the wrong unless they have an actual brain? Does that make sense? Anyway, yeah, Thomas is a bigot in this one, and Day of the Diesels. Damn it! Love that for me. So Thomas puffs away, and poor Diesel is left with his thoughts. Honestly, I feel bad for the guy. I can't blame him for being upset, especially if the Steamies treat him like that all the time. Kinda makes you wonder if he's in the right. Ha, JK, Diesel suck, lol! And decides to get revenge. No, not even, okay maybe, but mostly decides he wants to prove himself to Topham, and takes the jobi wood himself to show he is just as useful. And oh god, yes, I actually said this while watching, here it is. What everyone and myself included already mentioned, the fucking rhyming. Every other line, some of the characters are fucking rhyming. Especially Thomas, who never shuts his damn mouth because he's a little shit. And it's so annoying and makes the movie even more kiddie garbage. Since there's so much of it in this film, I'm gonna try not to mention it every single time it happens because if I did, I'd have a fucking aneurysm. But I will mention it every now and then when it's most annoying and prevalent because I need therapy. Whatever, let's keep going. Thomas sees Diesel puff by with the jobi wood and is like, oh no, Diesel's kidnapped my precious logs. I must chase after him and throw him off a bridge, that idiot. Tee, fuck off. Also, I love how Diesel just ignores Thomas. You go, Diesel, you damn legend. Okay, but like the music during the chase actually slaps. Thomas keeps whining and begging Diesel to stop, and like a dumbass, he even says out loud, I'm gonna race ahead of Diesel at this junction and beat his ass. And Diesel, of course, hears this and is like, no, and dips as Thomas gets stuck at the junction. Ha! Loser! He tries catching up to Diesel, who's rhyming to himself again, but to no avail. Then we see, gasp! Oh no! The bridge is out ahead! And for some reason, it's the bridge above the rescue center, which is somehow still the track that leads to it, and for some reason, the track isn't blocked off. But nope, this scene makes total sense. Totally, guys. Totally. Diesel comes in too fast, the jobi wood trucks fall off, and he's left dangling on the edge, but Thomas makes a decision. A big boy decision. And pushes Diesel off and he dies. Yay, the end. Thomas pulls Diesel back and saves the day. Great, love that. Was there any other choice to make besides pull him back though? I'll admit the shots of the jobi wood falling into the sea are pretty good and cinematic, and the music is, again, great. It helps bring in some tension, but other than that, kinda dumb scene, but one of the better ones in the film because at least it has action. So yeah, Thomas saves the day and Diesel thanks him, which leads to his friends and Topham congratulating him later, who states he made the right decision and didn't wait to be asked or told and did it anyway. Duh, what is he, a child? Yes! What else was he supposed to do? Anywho, Topham talks about how Diesel is a jackass and how fucked they are without the jobi wood, but promises Thomas a special reward, that he can visit the search and rescue center on the mainland. Like I thought the mainland was a bad place full of diesels where most steamies have been scrapped besides the preserved ones. Oh whatever, screw continuity, right? Just do whatever you want. We meet up at the docks the next day and get ready for Thomas to leave for the mainland on the ship. So here, I actually want to quickly address criticism I've seen, and that's the matter in question of why didn't Thomas take the bridge to the mainland instead of a ship? Now to that, my friends, I have a few answers. While it's a valid criticism, here's my thoughts. A, the writers didn't know about the bridge, the most likely option. This is because they didn't pay that much attention to the lore and therefore didn't know. Or B, Thomas is going into part of the mainland that's so far away, it'll take less time to get there by ship. Or C, they just chose to ignore it for the story, which is also likely. Anyway, Salty tells the engines about the legend and myth of Misty Island, a, yes, mysterious island not far from Sodor covered in mist, which we've somehow never heard of, and says that hardly anyone has ever seen it. Edward even says that he may have seen it a long time ago. Interesting detail. Then Salty mentions that there are strange engines that live there that puff and huff in very strange ways. Ooh, spooky. I do like that Salty tells the story. He's a fun character and always nice to see. He then mentions the smoke signals, telling a story of an engine once lost on Misty Island, who used the smoke from his funnel to signal for help. And Thomas and Percy exchange that if they were lost, they do the same thing and rescue each other. This will of course come into play later. I will say again, decent setup. Also, what's up with this weird delivery from Martin Sherman here? Also, Topham arrives with Diesel, who claims he has something to say to Thomas, which he is of course being forced to. He says goodbye and good luck. It's kind of funny because of how awful it is. Thomas was an asshole to him, and yeah, he rescued him, but still, I feel bad for Diesel. He just wanted to prove himself. The dock manager says the boat's full, and Thomas will have to wait, but of course, Thomas is an impatient little shit and doesn't want it. He notices a convenient rail raft behind the boat and says he'll ride in that, but is warned that it'll be dangerous. But being the cocky prick he is in this film, states he makes good decisions, accepts the risk, and rides it. We then follow the boat out at sea, which, hold up, hang on a damn minute, the deck of the ship is literally empty. How is there no room there? What the fuck? Anyway, I like how this part is shot and animated with the mist and all. Nice and ominous. However, the chain from Thomas's raft to the boat snaps, leaving Thomas in a panic and lost at sea. Now I'll admit, that would be terrifying, so I do feel bad for him. Still, Thomas was a dumbass for getting on it in the first place. What is it meant to be used for anyway if it's so unsafe? Misty Island rescue logic, I guess. In the early hours of the morning, Thomas has somehow ended up at the shore of an island. Gee, I wonder which one. And his raft coincidentally aligns with the track at a dock on the island, allowing him to move freely again. I'll admit, once again, I do feel bad for Thomas. This would be scary, but I mean, just how did he end up there? Obviously for plot convenience, but maybe the current actually does lead to Misty Island in the area where the ship was? I don't know how that works. Look, I could go on and on about the lack of logic behind Misty Island, but I've already summed that up and we'll discuss it at the end. And plenty of times throughout that I'm gonna complain about it, lol. Anyway, I really like how this scene looks. The mist, fog, and lighting all look, again, ominous and build a nice atmosphere, which I appreciate, so I'll give credit where credit is due. Probably my favorite scene in the film. Thomas is lost and scared, but decides to keep calm and look for a dockyard with people and a ship. Smart. Looking for people in general would be smart too, but this works. Then, spooky things start to happen. Woo! Thomas begins to hear strange sounds that he thinks are engines, which really are, but can't find the source. Ugh, they're rhyming. Please shut up, you little shit! He says the same rhyme twice within the span of a minute! After having enough with the trolling, Thomas rushes away and then ends up finding the source. 3 mysterious engines, who are of course Bash, Dash, and Ferdinand, and they're of American design, and really old ones too. Sure, whatever. Makes no sense why they're here, or even in Britain at all, but they're hillbillies. No, rednecks. Well, at least they're not racist like some engines, Thomas! Alright, might as well talk about them now. The logging locos are annoying as shit and don't fit in the Thomas world at all. Their gimmicky is just the hillbilly weirdo chaotic engines, and it just doesn't work. They're not even British. But then again, sometimes I like seeing American locomotives in Thomas. But it'd make more sense if they had British designs. Or maybe it wouldn't, I don't know. Let's talk about that later. Bash and Dash are basically Bill and Ben, but more annoying. And Ferdinand is like if Boko was a moron and joined in on their antics. But I will say, as a kid, I always kind of liked Ferdinand for his design and basis. And thought his personality of being not the brightest, but just a sweet, big-hearted, gentle giant was kind of nice in concept. And I liked it. But it was him saying, "That's right," all the time that ruined him and made him so annoying both for me and almost everyone else. If he didn't say it all the time and was the more mature of the three and his actual personality showed up more, maybe he'd be a better, more likable character. But we'll talk about how he could be improved again later. They look at Thomas with intimidation, who's obviously uncomfortable, and introduces himself to them. Why are they being so rude? They suddenly become friendly and introduce themselves and say they're on Misty Island, much to Thomas's confusion, shock, and horror. And they just start being weird and talk about how they were quote-unquote playing games with Thomas, but he didn't play back. Oh, boo-hoo. And offer to play now, with of course the best line in the film to finish it. That's right. Fucking... Thomas claims they're too strange and too scary, which I honestly thought was hilarious because they're probably harmless. Ha! They're not, because as we'll see, they're rednecks. Thomas is like, lol, you guys are idiots, I'm going home, bye! Thomas leaves to explore and find a way home on his own, and starts rhyming about how he makes good decisions. Dumbass, if you made good decisions, you wouldn't be here in the first place. Topham gets the call from the mainland that Thomas didn't arrive, and acts like he was just told a family member frickin' died. Jeez, Topham, they might not know where he is, but that doesn't mean he's dead, damn. Thomas at some point falls asleep and later wakes up and realizes he was definitely a jackass, and decides to find the rednecks and ask them for help. I like that Topham joins in on the search as he cares that much about his engines, especially the ones he's closest with, and I'm sure because it's Thomas too. I like to think that he'd do it for any engine, but I mean, come on, it's Thomas the tank engine we're talking about. Alright, now here's where the movie starts to turn into fluff and mush, where nothing important happens for a while, so I'm gonna stop rambling so much and I'm just gonna skim through until we get to the important stuff again. Sorry, I just want to get done with this dumbass movie. Also, it's just a given that the rhyming never ends and never do the "that's right," so I'm probably not gonna mention it every time because if I do, I'm gonna lose my mind. So let's just ignore it for now, please. Thomas eventually finds the logging camp and tries to reconcile with the logging locos, as they were offended by his bullshit but talk like they have the intelligence and maturity of toddlers, so can you blame Thomas for leaving them? But come on, he didn't have to be mean, and there is only hope right now. So Thomas apologizes, but they claim they're too busy even though no one is there. Too busy to help. Bullshit! Thomas then follows and stumbles upon the Joby Wood and realizes that the island is full of it, and explains everything to the logging locos to see if they'll help. Thomas spends the next few scenes trying to show the logging locos how to work more efficiently and shows off like a prick, thinking he's better than them, and even says his little rhyme in front of them about making good decisions, which they find hilarious, and it was. I laughed my ass off too. While the search party continues on Sodor, we're introduced to Whiff, who for some reason plays a key role in the film, and somehow knows a lot about the lore of Sodor and Misty Island. Fine, sure. My headcanon is that he used to work on Sodor a long time ago, but was sent back to the mainland only to come back later, which is why he knows so much. But in the context of the film, it literally makes no sense. As Thomas puts the logging locos to work, they complain that they won't have enough oil to keep working this hard, but Thomas ignores them and reaffirms his good decision-making skills. We see Percy continues to worry about Thomas and Topham doesn't feel any better. I do feel bad for them though. I'd be worried too. We then come to everyone's favorite bridge, the Shake Shake Bridge, one of the most unrealistic and stupid additions location-wise to Thomas, as you can clearly see how unstable it is, and that it'll fall if a fly just breathes on it. I'll be honest, I'm guilty of thinking it was kind of fun as a kid, and loved to make my own Shake Shake Bridge with wooden railway, and play with the Trackmaster set of it all the time after the movie came out, so I mean... Kids probably liked it, but it's just so stupid and doesn't fit Thomas at all. The logging locos of course think it's funny and cross it while singing a song along the way, and make fun of Thomas, who eventually crosses after much hesitance. Dumb scene for sure. Also, why does the narrator say, "Higgly piggly"? Just, why? So stupid. Also, gee, I sure do love it when Bill and Bash and Dash finish each other's sentences. Totally not annoying whatsoever. Nope. Whiff and Topham are at the rescue center and in front of a tunnel, which according to Whiff, apparently leads to Misty Island. And Whiff tells Topham he can't build his office there. Why would Topham want to build it there? In the tunnel? Or just next to it? Very convenient that there's a tunnel to Misty Island that again, we've never heard of, that not even Salty or Ed were mentioned. What the hell is going on, Miller? Talk to me! It'll of course come into play later. We meet old Wheezy, the log, quote-unquote, loader, more like launcher. That thing's gonna kill somebody. Just stupid. Of course the logs go flying and hit Thomas. I mean, what did you expect? He, or it, whatever, even throws the flatbed into the pond. The locos even tease Thomas that he's next, which obviously scares the shit out of him, and he runs away, disappointing them. Again, the logging locos are just complete morons. Thomas continues exploring, working with the logging locos as the search for him on Sodor continues. Which doesn't make sense. Why would he still be on Sodor if you saw him leave? Guess maybe he could have washed up on Sodor Shore or something? I don't know. Nothing makes sense in this film. Also, can I just say, do we need to keep needlessly cutting back to Sodor to see literally nothing has happened and everyone is just sad while they search for Thomas? It's jarring and keeps disrupting the scenes, but none of the scenes are really good, so does it even matter? Thomas decides to use Hee-Haw, another log loader for the wood, despite the logging locos telling him it uses a lot of oil, which they've already stated they need, so what the hell, Thomas? Shut the fuck up, please! We see Topham continue to search with Captain. Nice little scene, but what does he expect to find that close to shore? I don't know. Thomas ponders what to do next, and Dash accidentally spills the beans that there's a tunnel to Sodor, and they never told him about it, because it's too dangerous, allegedly. Or maybe they just wanted to keep him there because they're lonely. Oh, or just psychopaths, I don't know. Thomas forces them to join him on the journey to Sodor with the Joby logs, much to their worry for both their safety and oil capacity, as the narrator even mentioned the last of the oil was used on Hee-Haw. Thomas is being a dumbass know-it-all and ignores everything they say. We cut to, again, for the millionth time, the search on Sodor, where everyone's worried and sad. Oh, so sad. Oh, so sad. Thomas and the logging locos get to the tunnel, and they beg him to not force them to go, but Thomas is a jackass and ignores them. The four of them enter the sketchy tunnel and are ultimately met with a pile of debris and wreckage covering their exit, and out of bad luck and an idiot choice on Thomas's part, the tunnel behind them caves in, trapping them. Thomas forces them to try to push their way out by slamming against the rubble, but it of course doesn't work and they run out of oil. Well, guess they're trapped forever, then they all suffocate and die. The end. Great movie. Thomas is a freaking idiot in this film, and it's completely his fault that they're in this situation. Look, I get it. I'd want to use the tunnel too, as it seemed like there were no other options, but he should have listened to them and heeded their warnings. He could have left them on the island and gone by himself to get help, or waited for the mist to clear and sent out smoke signals like they said, but I don't know. At the same time, the only way he was able to get home is because of the smoke signals he sent while underground, but I don't know. I just don't know anymore. This movie is so beyond stupid, and I can't even discuss how illogical it is. I just want to be done with it. We're not far now, though, guys, from the end of the movie, so just stick with me. Thomas realizes his dumbass mistake and that he's been an ass all along, and I don't feel bad for him whatsoever. And he apologizes for being a cocky dick, and honestly, the logging locos are kind and forgiving, which is a nice change of pace. I'll admit they're annoying and stupid, but at least they try to be friendly in their own weird way, and are more likable than Thomas in this film, albeit only by a little bit. By some stroke of luck, a clearing opens above them to give room for Thomas to puff and send smoke signals into the sky for the engines on Sodor to hopefully see. Decent payoff. I respect that. But it's strange that the logging locos suggest it, because Salty did tell him about it earlier, but then again it's good he finally listens to them for once. At least this movie has some emphasis on some setup and payoff, but we'll talk about that where there could have been more later. Meanwhile, Percy continues to worry about Thomas at the docks, and sees the smoke signals by, of course, luck and convenience, and sounds the alarm immediately. Topham arrives and observes the smoke signals, and decides to do two things. Go to Misty Island with James, Gordon, and Edward to find Thomas, and send Percy and Whiff to the tunnel to see if that pans out. Either way, why the hell does he send 3 engines there? Like Tug said, he has a rescue team. Why not use them? Surely using Captain and Harold would be more effective. Don't get me wrong, I love seeing the steam team get involved in the action and go, but at the same time, it's pretty stupid when you think about it. My main question is, if there's no main dock at Misty Island, how the hell are they supposed to get on the track? Same convenient way Thomas did, I guess? Sure, whatever, I don't care. Back in the tunnel, Thomas tries comforting his friends with stories of Sodor, and they try comforting him by telling him how they were too wild for the mainland and got sent there as punishment. Still don't know why older American logging locos are in Britain, what the fuck? Percy and Whiff enter the tunnel as Topham and the other engines leave for Misty Island. Again, why couldn't they just only use the tunnel? Why do there have to be 2 teams of engines? Shouldn't there be a rescue team and an engine team? You know what, this movie's almost over, I just can't anymore. I will admit, I really like this shot of Topham, and mixed with the music, it raises the tension and stakes and tries to deceive us into thinking we're in an actually good movie. We're not, of course, but hey, it was a nice moment. Percy and Whiff arrive at the rubble, converse with Thomas, and decide they will push through to the other side since Thomas couldn't get through. It's also a decent little moment that Thomas realizes how Whiff knows much more about the tunnel and should be the one to make decisions, and so he lets him. It's on the nose, but whatever. Percy and Whiff push through and manage to save the day, much to everyone's delight. I like how Whiff's glasses are now crooked. That's a nice little detail. I also like that Thomas declares the logging locos are his friends, which is a nice little arc. He initially hated them and now calls them his friends. That's nice, I guess. Wait, did I just compliment Misty Island Rescue? Nope. The 3 big engines arrive on Misty Island to find Thomas, but of course, because he just got rescued, they won't. Poor bastards. Kind of fun to see them on Misty Island though. As a kid, I always enjoyed seeing both classic and new, just different characters on Misty Island. Always felt like a cross between worlds. I love seeing Topham so determined and on a mission like this though. I just wish it was in a more logical scenario. Anywho, again, we are constantly cutting between the two separate plots, and it's getting pretty annoying. Just stick with one for at least a few minutes. Please. That's probably one of my own nitpicks about the film. Percy, Whip, and Thomas and the Logging Locos arrive on Sodor with a very climactic shot and a nice little theme to go with it. They meet Emily, Toby, and Henry, who watch in awe and are shocked to see Tom. Oh, no. They're more interested in the Logging Locos. Love that. Their close friend, who they've been searching for and so worried about for a week or so, has finally come home, and they're more interested in his new friends. Sure, whatever. I mean, I'd want answers about the hillbilly redneck trains too, but first I'd be like, Thomas, you're okay. It's so good to see you. Who are your new friends? And then they introduce themselves. Also, Emily says what just might be the dumbest line of the whole movie. And where are you from? So let me get this straight. Emily watches as the band of engines exit the tunnel they know that leads to Misty Island because they've talked about it, and Percy and Whip just left through it and have now come back through it with Thomas plus more engines. Gee, they just came from the Misty Island tunnel, so I wonder where they're from. Whatever, this movie is just so dumb. And oh yeah, Thomas hears about the engines that have gone to Misty Island with Topham and decides to go after them, which makes sense, but he decides to go by ship. I mean, yeah, sure, since the tunnel's blocked on the other side, but wouldn't it make more sense for them to clear the rubble in the tunnel so everyone can get home quicker? But yeah, Thomas goes back and rhymes along the way. Love that. Thomas is back on Misty Island searching for his friends, and using his whistle and non-existent ears, finds his friends. And somehow knows where they are despite only being on Misty Island for what, a week? Okie dokie. When Topham sees Thomas, he whoops with joy and throws his hat in the air. Much to Thomas's worry, because he knows how important his hat is to him. But then Topham says the best line in the film. I'll admit, that's a nice line. Good for you, Miller. You wrote one good line. One. In the meantime, the Logging Locos are at the steamworks and are laughing. Wholesome enough. I like how non-judgmental and kind the Sodor engines are to them. Nicer and more accepting than Thomas was, at least. Then we all meet back at Sodor, where Topham greets the Logging Locos awkwardly, which is kind of funny, especially because of how awkward he looks without the hat. He declares work and finished on the rescue center with the rest of the Joby Wood. The Logging Locos help, the tunnel is fixed, and the rescue center is finished with a grand opening, and they all say, "That's right," for the 17th time, and the fucking movie ends. Oh, and then we get the best thing to ever grace my ears. Misty Island Rescue, here we go. The dumbest, most off-brand, un-Thomas feeling song up to this point, and one of the shittiest in my opinion, but a lot of the Wubba ones gave it a lot of competition. This song sounds like a country parody, guess because the Logging Locos are meant to be like country folk or rednecks or whatever. Sure, okay, but it doesn't fit Thomas. The lyrics are idiotic too. They say, searching through the tunnels one by one. There's only one tunnel. What other tunnels? Then the chorus praises the Logging Locos for some reason. Sure, they're the main new characters, and it says Thomas has to make amends. Yeah, because he was a dick, and then goes on about the 3 big engines going to Misty Island and says, steaming across the ocean. What the fuck is happening in this song? I don't understand. It's dumber than the movie. It just summarizes the last 2 major scenes of the climax. It sucks. So yeah, the song is ass and I hate it. But then, after all the shit, dumbassery, and antics we've endured throughout this garbage cesspool of a film, we get a very interesting little treat and teaser for the next film. One that as a kid, I didn't even see for a while because when the credits came on and the song started, I turned it off and didn't bother waiting through it. But boy, did I wish I had, because this was so cool to me as a kid when I saw it online. From behind the camera, up on the cliffs above the rescue center, gazing upon the engines who are happy and laughing hard, emerges Thomas and Friends' greatest and most iconic villain, Diesel 10 himself. He chuckles menacingly and mocks the steam engines, threatening that they'll be laughing on the other side of their boilers soon, and then laughs deviously as the camera and screen close in on him. This obviously teases his true cinematic return to the franchise in Day of the Diesels, his signature film where he stars as the main villain once again and attempts to put his master plan into action. Well, yeah, we're not going to talk about that movie quite yet, but I'll say for now, it was something at least. I do look forward to covering it in the next video though, as I think there's a lot to cover. Both the film as is and the potential it had to be excellent because, spoiler alert, it wasn't. But nonetheless, this teaser was so cool at the time, and I and a lot of the fandom were so hyped to see his return and eagerly awaited the next movie. Totally wasn't a major disappointment or anything, nope. Oh well, at least Miller followed up on what she teased. That deserves credit, I guess. So yeah, one of the best, if not at least the coolest scene of the film, but it doesn't have much competition, so... So yeah, that was Misty Island Rescue, and well, as we can clearly tell from the analysis, it's A complete disaster! What did you think it would be? Of course it's not a masterpiece. 2 out of 10. Worst Thomas movie ever. An unfixable mess. Goodbye. Okay, but seriously, this movie has some serious flaws that I nor most fans can't overlook. The abysmal writing, the almost entirely unlikable cast of characters that constantly make stupid decisions, the horrible, annoying as hell rhyming, the weak dialogue, which is worse than usual, the obnoxious and ever unbearable logging locos, the complete lack of realism, and most of all, the complete and utter absence of logic in the entire story and its concepts. None of it makes any sense. Sure, as a story, it flows fine aside from the constant cutting back and forth between Sodor and Misty Island, but the story conceptually and its ideas in general make no sense. This movie isn't, in my opinion, the most god-awful thing ever, and I just can't hate it too much because I grew up with it, and although I always kind of knew it sucked deep down, I used to have a soft spot for it. Emphasis on used to. But immediately after the Brenner era started and I grew a brain, I realized how bad it was, and it felt the same ever since. Is it completely unfaithful to what Thomas stands for, disrespects it, and only continues building on the notion that it's a show just for babies and young kids? Yeah, unfortunately it does. And I hate that more than anything, what it does to the franchise. Sure, it didn't wreck it as majorly as Thomas and the Magic Railroad, but it made us as fans lose so much hope in the franchise because of how bad it was. And although Series 13 was bad enough, it was this movie, in my opinion, that solidified how deep in shit we were. And for that and its many problems, including the points made at the beginning that I completely agree with, it's obviously not a masterpiece. It's far from being even a good movie. It's a terrible movie, an awful experience, a major stain on the legacy of the series, fatally flawed at its core. So, what do we do now? How do we fix such a mess? Well, my friends, that's where I come in. Improvements and changes. Where do I even start? This film is just a complete mess, and at its core, fails as a concept and doesn't work within the canon of Thomas and Friends whatsoever, and feels untrue to everything Thomas has ever been. I mean, come on. A mysterious small island off the coast of England that we know nothing about, that's supposedly a quote-unquote myth, and almost has a whole mini logging railway of engines working on it without any humans? It doesn't work. Now, there being a myth about a mysterious island does sound pretty cool, but just, I don't know, it doesn't fit in Thomas. So if I could, I'd scrap this entire film and create another one entirely. But alas, this series is about rewriting the specials or overhauling them, not erasing them and replacing them with something else. Those ideas may be saved for a different video after we've covered all the specials. So, we're just gonna have to stick with the Misty Island plot and see what we can do with it. So, here are the improvements and changes I would make. 1. Get rid of the rhyming. It's annoying as shit and very distracting and ruins the dialogue when it's present. 2. Add payoff for Diesel. So this is inspired by Tug's idea in his ranking video, and it's about Diesel and creating some payoff for the arc between him and Thomas. I actually really like the idea he pitched, so I'd actually like to integrate it into my own, but also add my own spin on it, so that way it isn't just a copy and paste. So let's talk about it. Make the Diesel prejudice, as well as Thomas's big quote-unquote ego arc, which we'll talk about later, a full arc. Firstly though, make Thomas just have a problem with Diesel himself specifically, and not with all Diesels, because that's stupid, unnecessary, and doesn't make any sense after his arc in calling all engines. This would have Diesel not only appearing at the beginning, where they would both meet at the dock still after we see the Joby logs, and Diesel would say something snarky and spiteful about how Diesels are superior to Steamies, teasing and goading Thomas into an argument. He could say, for example, "So Topham Hatt is blind. He may like you stinky Steamies more than Diesels, but if he gave us a chance, we'd show him how revolutionary and superior we really are. A Diesel like me should be the one to pull the Joby wood, not one of you." Thomas is irritated and says, "Diesel, Topham Hatt / the Fat Controller would never trust you with the Joby wood. You're devious and always causing trouble. Topham wants a really useful, responsible engine that he trusts. You'll never be that." And this pisses Diesel off to no end. And then he wants his revenge and steals the Joby wood. In the end, this movie's going to be about Thomas's ego and his learning not to judge others as much, especially the logging locos and Diesel, who prove him wrong later. The chase goes down relatively similar to how it did in the film, and Thomas still saves Diesel after. Diesel would appear throughout the film, at first grinning when he hears Thomas is missing, but is forced to help with the search despite being mad at Thomas for being an ass. Over time, he begins to feel bad as Thomas is not found, and begins to help more out of guilt and because Thomas saved him. Then eventually in the finale, he decides to join Percy and Whiff, who we'll talk about in a minute, on their mission to rescue Thomas, ultimately ending with Thomas being surprised but grateful and making amends with him, and Diesel forgives him, bringing the arc full circle with a lot of payoff and greater meaningfulness. Moving forward, Thomas now has more respect for Diesel. This arc and relationship between them will continue and advance and develop more as the specials go on, at least in my rewrites, so keep an eye out for that, my friends. Okay, the logging locos. Here we go. First off, make the twins the completely crazy locomotives that were sent away in disgrace from the US after behaving erratically and causing trouble after being built. For brief context, their backstory is that in real life, their basis, Bear Harbor Lumber Company's locomotive number 1, only 1 was built, but in my universe, 3 were built. Bash, Dash, and the unnamed original. The idea is that the original locomotive performed so well that the builders decided to make 2 more, but because they behaved so poorly and caused so much chaos where they worked, they were sent to a small logging island off the coast of England, where they would work for the Misty Island Logging Company, which was contracted by various railways and companies in Britain to send their signature and rare Joby wood to them for a variety of purpose, prominently for building. But we'll talk about Misty Island's backstory as a whole in a little bit. In short, Bash and Dash are chaotic, unpredictable engines, but have big hearts and want to be useful in the end, and they'll prove themselves later. Next, make Ferdinand the most prominent of the logging locos, the wiser, laid-back, logical, and more well put together one who was sent along and was either forced or volunteered, depending on your preference, to supervise and watch over the twins, and served as our, and Thomas's, guide into the world of Misty Island. In my rewrite, he also mentions his yearning and dream to pull passengers again, as he loves people and misses interacting with them dearly. Also no, he does not say, "That's right," in every other sentence. And yes, it does make him like the Boko to Bash and Dash as Bill and Ben, but I mean, whatever, that's just how it is. I'm not going to get rid of them as that would just fundamentally change the whole film, and I'm going to try my best not to do that. I'd rather just work with the films we've got and try to improve them rather than make something else entirely. However, I will if necessary. But I guess if I had to revamp one whole film, it'd be either this one, Day of the Diesels, or Bwapa. Anyway, in this version, Ferdinand guides Thomas through Misty Island and serves as the wise mentor character of the story, who tries to provide Thomas with advice where needed. But we'll talk about the overall story changes later. Alright, now this is a maybe change. Maybe. Replace Whiff with another character. Now don't get me wrong, I kinda love that Whiff was a supporting character in this film. He utilizes the lore giver and wise old fellow. He knows everything about the secret mysterious island, but damn. After seeing Tug's movie ranking video, rewatching the film myself, and reflecting on it, I realized one thing. It doesn't make sense. He hasn't been on the island that long, so how would he know? It makes more sense for Edward or hell, even Salty to know about this sort of thing. Now if you want to keep him, we can expand on Whiff's backstory in this film and reveal that he worked on Sodor long ago before the NWR was created, or was in its early days, but was sent away as either the railways merged into the Northwestern or Topham didn't need or couldn't afford him. Either way, he was no longer needed. But then Topham found him again many decades later and bought him immediately. Whiff works with garbage, completing his favorite job, helping clean Sodor and making things anew and ready to be recycled. Anywho, point is, he knows plenty about Sodor, and upon hearing of Misty Island, such as he's present at the docks when Salty tells the story, or Edward, or even he mentions it but doesn't speak up about it, or when Percy or someone else brings up Misty Island a little later in the film, he realizes that he knows a good bit about it and believes it to be a dangerous place, giving him further motivation to want to rescue Thomas. More than as is, because duh, and even explore the island as he's a huge nerd. Or maybe he even met the logging locos and wants to reunite with them, or meet them at last after hearing them after long thinking they were gone. I don't know. Honestly, I would kinda like to keep him in the film, and really like this idea, so for the purposes of this rewrite, we'll keep Whiff in. But if you prefer, he can be pretty easily replaced by Edward or even Salty. Preferably Edward. Anywho, next, use the rescue team. In short, in the climax, send Topham on Captain and or Harold to Misty Island instead of with the big engines. While I think the 3 engines going to Misty Island is kind of a fun concept, it doesn't really work, and it feels pretty pointless in this movie. Having them be part of the rescue would be great and serve as payoff for the setup of the search and rescue center at the beginning. Near the end, when everyone at Brendam sees the smoke signals, have Topham send Percy, Diesel, and Whiff, or whoever you prefer to take Whiff's role, to the tunnel and try their rescue operation there, similar to the movie. But in this rewrite, Topham asks for Captain and Harold's help and sends them to Misty Island to look for Thomas and rides in Harold. Like in the movie, Whiff, Percy, and now Diesel find Thomas and the logging locos, help him escape, bring him back to Sodor, and Thomas finds out Topham left to find him on Misty Island, which leads him to go back through the tunnel, and with the help of his friends and some workmen, they clear the rubble, and Thomas is able to return to Misty Island, where he searches for Topham, who's still in Harold. Thomas decides to start whistling and uses smoke signals once again, which helps Topham and Harold spot him. Harold finds a place to land nearby where Topham hops out and reunites with a happy Thomas, and gleefully throws his hat into the air and states his signature, great line from the original film. And then basically the rest of the film carries on the same, with the rescue center being finished, the logging locos getting fixed, etc. Okay, So, explain Misty Island. This is the biggest one. So, Misty Island, its backstory, and its existence are the most prominent problems with the film in my opinion, so I'm going to try to explain it. It won't be perfect, as I'm no historian, but after taking a look at Sodor's history again, I tried my best. Here's my take. Off the south coast of the island of Sodor lies a small island that is often covered in mist, but can sometimes be seen from where Brenham Docks now stands. A long time ago, the island was discovered by explorers, quite by accident, as they were sailing off the coast of Sodor when beyond the mist and fog, they saw a landmass and decided to investigate. There, they found the island to be covered in forests of bright red wood, and upon their return, reported it to the local authorities. It was ultimately decided that the island's wood would be used for buildings on the island as its economy, industries, and population continued to grow, and be used for trade with other countries in Europe. For the longest time, it was used as a hub for a logging company that would trade its signature, strong Joby wood with companies across Europe and America, and began to thrive. As time went on, the need for more help with unloading and loading logs and wood became more prevalent. As railways and railroads were becoming more prominent in the 1800s, the owners of the company decided they could use locomotives on the island to be more efficient. So plans were made and tracks were laid, and the need for locomotives arose. Ultimately, a few industrial engines were brought to the island and the company prospered. The tunnel between Sodor and Misty Island formed sometime during the days of the Wellsworth and Sudbury Railway, as the idea was that it would be more efficient to transport the logs to Sodor and then export the goods from there, as opposed to doing so from the smaller docks of Misty Island. On top of this, workers that lived on Sodor would be able to travel home via passenger trains to their families, instead of having to take the boat every day. The Misty Island Logging Company continued to thrive in the early 1900s. However, upon bringing in 3 more locomotives from the US to help, and as the new engine's punishment for misbehaving, trouble and conflict would arrive as well. Their names were Bash, Dash, and Ferdinand. Bash and Dash were young, bouncy, and cheeky, and would play tricks all the time on the other engines and workers. And although seemingly harmless at first, their tricks would only end up causing disaster. Ferdinand, the slightly older but more mature and wiser of the 3, tried to keep them in line, but even he could not control their chaotic natures. One day, Bash and Dash's tricks and antics go too far, and they cause a serious accident that leads to a huge fire, which destroys much machinery, buildings, and a lot of the logging company's headquarters as a whole. The company couldn't pay for all the repairs, so they declared bankruptcy and closed. The other engines were sent away or scrapped, and as punishment, the 3 logging locos were kept there on the island. Following the merging of the railways of Sodor and formation of the NWR, it was soon forgotten about. In the end, it became a place of desolation, decay, and almost legend. That's why so very few engines talk about it, or even know of its existence. Salty only knows because he was familiar with so much lore and stories of not just the seas of Britain, but the world. And as a result, of course he knows about the now elusive island, much to Edward and Whiff's surprise, who also know about it. No one talks about Misty Island because of how awful and tragic its end was, as although no lives were lost, because it's a Thomas movie so it can be dark but not that dark, the damage was done, and the company was left with dust, ashes, and locomotives and workers without a home. A sad end to a once prosperous company, island, and team. Until now, when it is rediscovered by our friend, Thomas, in his latest adventure, which leads me to my big rewrite. Alright, now, rewrite time. And this will include all the changes and improvements I made. We have the rescue center being built, the Thomas versus Diesel rivalry in arc, and so the Joby logs fall into the water. So what next? Well, first, I'd like to pose a question to you all, just as an idea. What if, instead of going to the mainland rescue center, Thomas hears of the legend of Misty Island, minus the specifics such as the name of the locomotives and the tragedy that occurred, but including the fact that it has Joby wood, and wants to go. Now I know, completely different from the actual film, right? But what if that's the case? In my new version, my friends, here's how the story goes. Like in the film, Topham and the engines are upset because the Joby logs were lost, right? So obviously we need more, but the only places that have it are very far away. So it'll take time to make another order and for it to be delivered. So what if there's an alternate solution? Salty, Whiff, or Edward, whichever you prefer, tells Thomas that Joby logs grow on Misty Island. That if it's out there, he will find some. Topham hears the idea and dismisses it. Either that or he doesn't hear about it, thinking it only to be legend that his father and grandfather, the original Sir Topham Hats before him, never spoke of. Or maybe they did, but only described it as either legend or something to never discuss due to its tragic end. So instead of going to the mainland search and rescue center as promised, Thomas asks Salty, Edward, or Whiff how to get there, and either A, is told about the tunnel and uses it, but it ultimately collapses behind him, trapping him there, or B, Thomas asks someone to take him to the island via ship, in which when he gets there, there's a crane that's able to lift him onto the tracks. So, when Thomas gets to Misty Island, he is greeted by Bash and Dash, who initially try to scare and tease him, but then Ferdinand comes along and keeps them in line, and tells Thomas not to fear them, and comforts him. Ferdinand shows Thomas around Misty Island, and explains the extensive background of it that I created, and reveals the specifics of the tragic story behind why it's been abandoned, and that the three of them were left behind in shame as punishment. Thomas then starts to distrust them, and decides to get the Joby logs on his own. Thomas tries leaving to go back home, but can't, as the boat left due to the mist coming in, or the tunnel collapsed, and he tries to push through it, but to no avail. In my opinion, I like the idea that he takes the tunnel but it collapses behind him. It makes more sense. Thomas decides to give them a second chance and works hard with them throughout the film to load the Joby logs. Meanwhile, the engines on Sodor begin to get worried about where Thomas is, as he's been gone a few days, and while they initially try to cover for him so that Topham doesn't find out and he doesn't get into trouble, Topham interrogates the main engines and Percy confesses about their plan, and that Thomas has gone to Misty Island. Topham is shocked and mortified, stating that no one has been to Misty Island for a long time, at least as far as he knows, and states that they will try searching for Misty Island to bring him home, and that the tunnel is too dangerous to use again. However, the mist is too thick to search at the moment, so they have to wait. The engines become more worried about Thomas, even Diesel, who experiences some guilt and concern. Meanwhile, similar to the film, Thomas and the logging locos work together and gather Joby logs to take to Sodor, at least for a first trip, and Thomas ultimately decides that together, they should be able to push through the rubble in the tunnel, which the logging locos, especially Ferdinand, are unsure about. They use the tunnel but ultimately get trapped in as they try to push through the rubble blocking the tunnel, but the tunnel collapses behind them, leaving them stranded. Keep in mind that this rewrite is less about Thomas's arc and more about him going on an adventure and serving as our POV character into the legend of Misty Island. Sure, he's a bit cocky and rude to Diesel at the beginning, not as much as in the original, and gets a bit conceited after the rescue and being praised for it, but is never as big-headed as he was in the original movie. He does make a mistake though by judging the logging locos at first and then not listening to them, and then taking the risk of using the tunnel again, which costs them dearly and almost renders them stuck forever. But yeah, it's less about his arc and more about the journey he goes on and everything he learns. But then, like in the film, Thomas finds an opening where he can use smoke signals to call for help, and luckily, Percy and Cranky see it from Brenham Docks and tell Topham, which leads into the rescue operation I mentioned before. With Diesel, Percy, and whichever third character you personally think is best, Edward Salty or Whiff, using the tunnel, and Topham using the rescue team. The three engines manage to make it through the tunnel to where it is blocked, and Thomas and the logging locos are stuck on the other side. The three manage to push through and save the day, much to everyone's delight. All of them work together to return to Sodor, Thomas makes up with Diesel, and then returns to Misty Island to reunite with Topham. And then the ending I pitched earlier occurs, with everything working out for the best. A much better song plays about the film, one more fitting of Thomas and Friends as a franchise. However, just like in the original, after the credits and song, Diesel Tennant emerges from the cliffside, watching over our friends, smirking deviously, declaring he will return and have his revenge, laughing maliciously. The film closes as we zoom in on Diesel Tennant's face, with his evil grin intact, teasing the next film. The end. Now, that rewrite is far from perfect, but doesn't that sound much better? Personally, I tried my hardest on this rewrite, guys. I spent months stuck on where to go, and what ideas were worth using and which ones deserve the scrap heap, but after finally pushing through the writer's block and coming up with this pitch, I actually feel pretty good about it, and honestly decently proud of what I came up with. This is my most in-depth rewrite yet, and personally, I think it turned out okay. Pretty well, even. And I sincerely hope you all like it too, but if not, that's completely fine. And if you'd like, leave your constructive criticisms and even your own ideas and pitches in the comments below, as I'd truly love to hear them. Anyway, that's all from me, folks. This Hick Bomb was easily the hardest to both write and edit, so I hope you all enjoyed it and had at least half as much fun with it as I did. With the humor and fun commentary parts I added in for comedic effect, which I think made it more tolerable and enjoyable to make and watch. So I'll see you in the next one, folks. Day of the Diesels, here we come, which I actually have a good number of ideas for the rewrite of, and I can't wait to share them with you all. Bye all, and have a great day.